The 26-year-old royal queen mocked him. So he walked away without ever looking back. Part 1. The throne room of the Valorian sovereignty stretched for nearly a kilometer, its crystal walls catching the light of 3 distant suns and scattering it into 1,000 dancing colors. Every surface gleamed with the wealth of 1,000 conquered worlds, and every pillar stood as a monument to imperial power that had lasted for 10,000 years. But today, that power meant nothing. Queen Seraphina Velthora sat upon her floating throne, her bioluminescent skin pulsing with soft blue light as she read the latest reports from the front lines. At 26 years old by galactic standard, she was considered young for a monarch, but her eyes carried the weight of a dying empire. The Krethis horde had consumed 12 of her border systems in the past year alone, and her fleets were breaking against the endless swarm like waves against an unmovable cliff. "Your Majesty," her chief advisor, Counselor Vethan, said, his 4 eyes blinking nervously, "the Galactic Council has made their position clear. They believe our only hope lies with the humans." Seraphin's luminescence flickered with irritation. The humans! A species so primitive that they had only discovered faster than light travel a mere century ago. A species that lived such short lives that their leaders changed every few decades. What could such creatures possibly offer the eternal Valorian sovereignty? And the Council truly believes these mayflies can succeed where our ancient fleets have failed? She asked, her voice dripping with contempt. "The reports are difficult to ignore, Your Majesty. The humans have held their border against the Krethis for 3 years without losing a single colony. Their soldiers fight with a ferocity that even the Horde cannot match." Seraphina waved a dismissive hand, her long fingers cutting through the air like blades. "Exaggerations! Propaganda from a young species desperate for recognition. But if the Council insists, we shall humor them. Send word that we will receive a human representative." 2 weeks later, the human arrived. Captain Kang Duhayan stepped off his shuttle and onto the crystal landing platform. His boots clicking against the polished surface. He was unremarkable by any galactic standard. No bioluminescence, no telepathic aura, no visible augmentations. He stood at average height for his species, with black hair cut short and a face that seemed carved from stone. His uniform was simple gray fabric with minimal decoration, and he carried no visible weapons. The Valorian honor guard stared at him with barely concealed disappointment. This was the representative of the species that had supposedly held back the Krethis? This ordinary-looking creature with dull skin and limited senses? Duhayan said nothing as they escorted him through the palace corridors. He did not gawk at the priceless artwork or marvel at the floating gardens. His dark eyes simply observed, noted, and moved on. When they finally reached the throne room, he walked the entire kilometer to the Queen's throne without any sign of fatigue or intimidation. "You stand before Her Eternal Majesty, Queen Seraphina Velthora, Sovereign of the Valorian Empire, Keeper of the Sacred Light and Protector of 10,000 worlds," the herald announced in a booming voice. Duhayan offered a respectful bow, not too deep, not too shallow. "Captain Kang Duhayan, representing the United Human Federation. I bring greetings from my government and an offer of military assistance." Seraphina studied him from her throne, her glowing eyes traveling slowly over his form. "So this is what humanity sends to save an empire." One man in a plain uniform. "I am an ambassador, Your Majesty. The soldiers come later, if we reach an agreement." A soft ripple of laughter spread through the assembled courtiers. Seraphina allowed herself a small smile. "Tell me, Captain, how many years has your species traveled among the stars?" 112 years, Your Majesty. "And you believe you can offer meaningful assistance to a civilization that has ruled this region of space for 10 millennia? Duhayan's expression remained neutral. "I believe we can help you survive the Krethis, Your Majesty." That is why I am here. Survive. Seraphina repeated the word as if it tasted bitter. The Valorian Empire does not merely survive, Captain. We endure. We conquer. We shape the destiny of galaxies. With respect, Your Majesty, the Krethis do not care about your history. They only care about consuming your worlds. My government has developed tactics and weapons specifically designed to counter their swarm intelligence. We are offering to share this knowledge. The Queen leaned forward on her throne, her luminescence intensifying. And what do humans want in return? Territory? Resources? Political influence? A fair trade agreement and mutual defense pact. Nothing more. Councillor Vethan stepped forward, his expression hopeful. Your Majesty, perhaps we should consider silence. Seraphine's voice cracked through the air like thunder. She rose from her throne, her royal robes flowing around her like liquid silver. I have heard enough of human arrogance. You come to my throne room, a representative of a species that cannot even live 200 years, and you speak of saving us? Duhayan remained perfectly still. I speak of partnership, Your Majesty. Partnership. She laughed, and the sound echoed off the crystal walls. What partnership can exist between the eternal and the temporary? Your entire species is a footnote in galactic history. You are children playing at civilization, and you dare to offer us your protection? The courtiers laughed openly now, their mockery filling the massive chamber. Duhayan stood alone in the center of it all, his face betraying nothing. I see, he said quietly when the laughter finally faded. Then may I ask Your Majesty a direct question? Seraphina smiled with cruel amusement. Ask. Do you want humanity's help or not? The Queen's smile widened. We would sooner watch our empire burn than accept aid from crawling insects who learned starflight yesterday. Go home, little human. Tell your leaders that the Valorian sovereignty does not need salvation from mayflies. Captain Kang Duhayan nodded once, his expression unchanged. He offered another bow, exactly as respectful as the first. Then I wish your empire well, Your Majesty. Goodbye. He turned and began walking toward the distant doors. The courtiers watched in stunned silence, waiting for him to stop, to turn back, to beg for another chance to prove humanity's worth. Surely he would not simply leave. But Captain Kang Duhayan walked the entire kilometer without slowing, without hesitating, and without ever looking back. The great doors opened before him and closed behind him, and just like that, he was gone. Queen Seraphina laughed again, but this time, the sound rang hollow in the empty air. Foolish creature, she said to her courtiers. He will return. They always do. But deep in the shadows of her heart, a small voice whispered that she had just made a terrible mistake. The 26-year-old royal queen mocked him, so he walked away without ever looking back. Part 2. 3 days passed, and Captain Kang Duhayan did not return. Queen Seraphina refused to acknowledge her growing unease. She threw herself into the daily business of running an empire, signing documents, meeting with military commanders, and pretending that everything was proceeding according to plan. But every time the throne room doors opened, her eyes flickered toward them, searching for a gray uniform that never appeared. He is simply attempting to strengthen his negotiating position, she told Councillor Vethan on the 4th day. Humans are known for their crude bargaining tactics. He will return with a more humble attitude soon enough. Vethan said nothing, but his 4 eyes held a worried light. A week passed, then 2. Reports from the front lines grew increasingly desperate. The Krethis horde had broken through the defensive line at the Malorn cluster, consuming 3 more colony worlds in a matter of days. Millions of Valorian citizens died screaming as the swarm devoured everything in its path. Where is the human ambassador? Admiral Kethra demanded during a war council. Surely now is the time to reconsider his offer. Seraphine's luminescence flared with anger. The human made his choice when he walked away. We do not chase after those who abandon us. With respect, Your Majesty, he did not abandon us. We dismissed him. The Queen's cold stare silenced the Admiral. Are you suggesting that I was wrong to defend the dignity of our empire? No one dared to answer. 1 month after Captain Duhayan's departure, the first rumors began to reach the Valorian intelligence network. The humans had not returned to their own borders. Instead, they had traveled to the Malthari Federation, a small collection of 12 worlds on the far side of the galactic arm. The Malthari were a peaceful species, considered weak by most galactic powers, and they had been facing their own Krethis incursion. The human ambassador met with the Malthari Council for only 6 hours before they reached a full military alliance. Vethan reported, his voice carefully neutral. Human warships arrived in Malthari space 3 days later. Seraphine's fingers tightened on the arms of her throne. And what has happened since? The Krethis advance into Malthari territory has stopped completely. Human soldiers are fighting alongside Malthari defense forces, and they are winning. Every major engagement has resulted in human victory. The throne room fell deathly silent. Every courtier, every advisor, every guard understood the implications. The humans had offered the same help to Valoria, and Valoria had thrown it back in their faces. Now that help was going to someone else. Show me, the Queen commanded. The holographic display activated, filling the air above the throne with images from the Malthari front. Human soldiers in heavy armor dropped from the sky like falling stars, landing in the middle of Krethis swarm formations and tearing through them with weapons that burned like miniature suns. Human warships moved with impossible coordination, their weapons cutting through Krethis bioships as if they were made of paper. And there, at the center of it all, stood Captain Kang Duhayan. He was no longer wearing his diplomatic uniform. Now he wore the same heavy armor as his soldiers, and he fought alongside them in the mud and blood of alien battlefields. His face remained as calm as it had been in the Valorian throne room, but his actions spoke of barely contained fury. He moved through the Krethis like death itself, never retreating, never hesitating. The Malthari are calling him a hero, Vethan said quietly. They say he personally led the charge that saved their capital city. Their council has offered him citizenship and honorary noble status. Seraphina watched the images in silence, her luminescence dim and unstable. She remembered how she had laughed at this man. She remembered calling his species insects, mayflies, children. Now, those same children were doing what her ancient empire could not. They were defeating the Krethis. Find out how to contact him, she finally said. Tell him that we are prepared to discuss terms. The message was sent that very day. The response came a week later. Ambassador Kang is currently unavailable. Your request has been noted. Seraphina sent another message, this time with more specific offers, trade concessions, territorial acknowledgments, formal recognition of humanity's status as a major galactic power. The response was identical. Ambassador Kang is currently unavailable. Your request has been noted. As the months dragged on, the Valorian Empire continued to crumble. The Krethis consumed world after world, their hunger endless and their numbers infinite. 40% of Valorian territory fell under swarm control. Refugee ships fled toward the core worlds, carrying billions of desperate citizens who had lost everything. And all the while, the Malthari Federation grew stronger. Human engineers helped them build new defenses. Human scientists shared technology that the Malthari had never dreamed possible. Human soldiers taught them how to fight, how to resist, how to survive. Why? Seraphina whispered one night, alone in her private chambers. Why will they not answer? She already knew the answer. Captain Kang Duhayan had asked her a simple question that day in the throne room. He had asked if she wanted humanity's help. and she had told him that she would rather watch her empire burn. Now her empire was burning, and the humans were simply honoring her wishes. Counselor Vethan found her standing at her window, watching the distant lights of ships fleeing the outer systems. "Your Majesty, we have received a new intelligence report. Captain Kang has been promoted to Fleet Admiral. He now commands a combined human Malthry force of over 200 warships." Serafina closed her eyes. "He was just an ambassador when he came to us." "Yes, Your Majesty." The Malthry elevated him after he saved their homeworld. Their queen personally awarded him their highest military honor. Their queen? Queen Minseo of the Malthry. She is young, like you, only 24 standard years. But she welcomed Admiral Kang as an equal rather than looking down upon him. They say she asked for his advice on her first day of working with the humans, and she has listened to his counsel ever since. The comparison cut deeper than any blade. A younger queen ruling a smaller empire had done what Serafina could not. She had set aside her pride and accepted help from those she did not understand. And now that younger queen's empire was thriving while Seraphine's was dying. "Send one more message," Serafina commanded, her voice barely above a whisper. "Tell Admiral Kang that I wish to meet with him personally. Tell him I will come to human space myself if necessary." Vethan bowed low. "What if he refuses again, Your Majesty?" Queen Serafina Velthora, sovereign of the dying Valorian Empire, turned to face her most trusted advisor. Her luminescence had faded to almost nothing, and her eyes held the haunted look of someone who had finally understood the price of pride. "Then I will go anyway," she said, "and I will not leave until he agrees to see me. I have already lost too much. I will not lose what remains simply because I am too proud to beg." For the first time in her reign, Serafina was willing to humble herself, but she could not know if it was already too late. The 26-year-old royal queen mocked him, so he walked away without ever looking back. Part 3. The small Valorian diplomatic vessel dropped out of hyperspace at the edge of the Sol system, and Queen Serafina pressed her face to the viewport like a child seeing stars for the first time. She had expected to find a primitive backwater, a small civilization struggling to maintain its foothold among the giants of the galaxy. What she found instead left her breathless. Human ships filled the void around her, thousands of them. Massive cargo vessels moved in endless streams between orbital stations, carrying goods and materials to destinations unknown. Sleek warships patrolled in perfect formation, their weapons arrays dark but ready. And everywhere, there was movement and life and purpose. "This is Sol traffic control to unidentified Valorian vessel." A human voice crackled through the communication system. "State your purpose and cargo." Serafina activated the transmission herself, refusing to let her remaining attendants speak for her. "This is Queen Serafina Velthora of the Valorian Sovereignty. I am here to request an audience with Admiral Kang Duhayan." A long pause followed. Then the voice returned, somehow even more casual than before. "Copy that, Valorian vessel. Proceed to holding pattern at Beacon 7 and await further instructions. Be advised that Admiral Kang is currently off-world. Expected return is 3 days from now." "I will wait," Serafina said. 3 days. She had traveled across half the galaxy, leaving her dying empire behind, and now she would wait 3 days in a holding pattern like any common merchant. A year ago, she would have raged at the insult. Now she simply guided her ship to the designated beacon and powered down her engines. The waiting gave her time to observe. Human society was not what she had expected at all. Their communications channels buzzed with a chaotic mixture of official announcements, commercial broadcasts, music, arguments, and laughter. Their ships came in every shape and size, from tiny personal craft to massive industrial platforms. Nothing was standardized, nothing was uniform, and yet somehow it all worked together in a symphony of controlled chaos. On the second day, a small human vessel approached her position. "Queen Seraphina? This is Lieutenant Park Sumin. Admiral Kang has been informed of your arrival. He has authorized me to escort you to Earth while you wait, unless you would prefer to remain in your ship." Seraphina hesitated for only a moment. "I accept your offer, Lieutenant." Earth was beautiful in a way she had not anticipated. It was a violent world. She could see the scars of ancient impacts, the churning storms in its atmosphere, the tectonic plates grinding against each other beneath its surface. This was a death world by any reasonable standard, a place that should have killed its inhabitants rather than nurturing them. And yet somehow, impossibly, life thrived here. Lieutenant Park guided her through the crowded streets of a massive coastal city, and Seraphina found herself surrounded by humans for the first time. They did not bow to her. They did not step aside. They simply flowed around her like water around a stone, going about their lives without caring that a galactic queen walked among them. "Does no one recognize who I am?" she asked. Lieutenant Park shrugged, a gesture Seraphina had learned meant casual indifference. "They might. Humans just do not really care about royal titles. We had our own kings and queens once, but we mostly got rid of them a few centuries ago. Nothing personal against you specifically. Nothing personal." The words struck Seraphina like a physical blow. The Valorian Empire had spent 10,000 years demanding respect and worship from the galaxy. And here, on this chaotic death world, an alien queen was simply another face in the crowd. On the third day, Admiral Kang Duhayan returned to Earth. Lieutenant Park escorted Seraphina to a quiet hillside outside the city, where rows of white stones stretched across the green grass in perfect lines. Humans of all ages walked among the stones, some leaving flowers, some simply standing in silence. Seraphina did not understand what this place was until she saw the words carved into the stones. Names. Each stone bore a name and dates, and sometimes a few words of remembrance. "This is a memorial for our fallen soldiers," Lieutenant Park explained quietly. "Admiral Kang comes here whenever he returns to Earth. He is over there, near the western section." Seraphina found him standing before a simple white stone, his gray uniform identical to the one he had worn in her throne room. He did not look up as she approached, his eyes fixed on the carved name before him. "Sergeant Major Han Ji-won," she read aloud. "Who was he?" "She," Duhayan corrected, his voice soft. "She was my partner during the early Krethis campaigns. She died 3 years ago, holding a defensive line so that evacuation ships could escape. 300 civilians lived because she refused to retreat." Seraphina stood in silence, unsure what to say. In her world, death was a distant concept. Valorians lived for thousands of years, and war casualties were statistics rather than personal losses. But humans burned so bright precisely because they burned so briefly. Every life was precious because every life was temporary. "You come here to remember her," Seraphina said. "I come here to remember all of them. Every soldier who died under my command. Every name on these stones represents someone who trusted me, and I will not let them be forgotten." He finally turned to face her, and Seraphina was struck by how little he had changed. The same calm expression, the same steady eyes, the same quiet dignity that she had mistaken for weakness. "You wanted to see me, Your Majesty. I am here. Say what you came to say." Seraphina drew herself up to her full height, still shorter than Duhayan, she realized with uncomfortable awareness. "Admiral Kang, the Valorian Empire is dying. The Krethis have consumed nearly half of our territory, and our fleets cannot hold them back. I am here to formally request military assistance from the United Human Federation." Duhayan's expression did not change. "You had our assistance. You threw it in our faces. I know. I was arrogant and foolish, and my people are paying the price for my pride. I am not here to make excuses. I am here to ask for a second chance. Why should we give you one? Humanity has limited resources and many potential allies. The Malthari valued our partnership from the beginning. Why should we divert ships and soldiers to help an empire that mocked us? Because my people are innocent. Seraphine's voice cracked with desperation. They did not laugh at you, I did. They did not dismiss your offer, I did. Billions of Valorians are dying because of my arrogance, and they deserve better than a queen who let pride destroy their future. Duhayan studied her for a long moment, his dark eyes unreadable. Words are easy, Your Majesty. Anyone can apologize when they are desperate. How do I know this is not simply another negotiating tactic? What would you have me do? Serafina asked. Tell me, and I will do it. Whatever proof you need, whatever sacrifice you demand, I will provide it. Admiral Kang Duhayan turned back to the memorial stone, his shoulders carrying the weight of every name carved in white. When he spoke again, his voice was barely above a whisper. Go home, Your Majesty. Return to your dying empire and prove that you have changed. Not with words, not with promises, but with actions. Show me that you understand what it means to value life over pride. Show me that the lives of your people matter more to you than the dignity of your throne. And if I do, will you come? Duhayan did not answer immediately. He reached out and touched the cold stone before him, his fingers tracing the carved name of a woman who had died believing in him. Prove it first, he said finally. Then we will see. Queen Serafina Velthora bowed her head, the first genuine bow she had offered anyone in her entire reign. Then she turned and walked away, back toward her waiting ship, back toward an empire on the edge of extinction. She had one chance to prove herself. She could not afford to waste it. The 26-year-old royal queen mocked him, so he walked away without ever looking back. Part 4. Serafina returned to find her empire in chaos. The Krethis had pushed even deeper during her absence, and the remaining Valorian fleet was stretched to its breaking point. Panic gripped the core worlds as refugees flooded inward from the burning frontier. The noble houses were already fighting among themselves, each one scrambling to secure their own survival at the expense of everyone else. Your Majesty! Counselor Vethan rushed to meet her as she stepped off her ship. Thank the sacred light you have returned. The Grand Council is demanding your presence. They speak of surrender, of negotiating with the Horde. The Krethis do not negotiate, Serafina said flatly. They only consume. I have told them this, but they are desperate. The people are terrified. Half the noble houses are preparing to flee to neutral space. Serafina looked at her faithful advisor, seeing the exhaustion and fear in his 4 eyes. He had served her family for 300 years, and he had never looked as old as he did in this moment. Gather the Grand Council, she commanded, and summon every noble house head, every military commander, every regional governor. I will address them all together. The assembly took place in the Great Hall of Unity, a vast chamber that had not been fully opened in over 1,000 years. Representatives from every corner of the dying empire packed the tiered seats, their luminescence flickering with a mixture of hope and despair. When Serafina took her place at the central podium, a heavy silence fell over the crowd. I know why you have gathered, she began, her voice carrying to every corner of the hall. You want to know if I have brought salvation from the humans. You want to know if the mighty Valorian Empire will be rescued by the species we once dismissed as primitives. Murmurs rippled through the assembly. Some of the nobles exchanged uncomfortable glances. I have no rescue to offer. The humans will not save us, not because they cannot, but because we have not earned their help. I traveled to their world expecting to negotiate, to bargain, to use our desperate situation as leverage. Instead, I learned a truth that I should have understood long ago. She paused, letting the silence stretch. We are not dying because of the Krethis. We are dying because of our own arrogance. For 10,000 years, we have looked down upon every other species in the galaxy. We have demanded worship. We have expected obedience. And when a simple ambassador from a young species offered us partnership, we laughed in his face. The hall was utterly still. No one had ever heard their queen speak like this. I was the one who laughed. I was the one who called humanity insects and mayflies. I was the one who told Ambassador Kang that we would rather burn than accept his help. And now we are burning, and I have no one to blame but myself. Lord Velcroth, the oldest of the noble house heads, rose from his seat. Your Majesty, if the humans will not help us, then what hope remains? Should we simply wait for the horde to consume us all? No, Seraphina said firmly. We should become worthy of help. We should prove that we are more than our pride. She raised her hand, and the holographic display behind her activated. From this moment forward, I am issuing the following decrees. First, our borders are open. Every refugee from every species fleeing the Krethis will be welcomed in Valorian territory. We have the resources and the space. We will use them. Gasps echoed through the hall. Opening borders to alien refugees was unheard of in Valorian history. Second, all restricted military technology will be shared freely with our allied species. If our weapons can help others survive, then we have no right to hoard them. The Myrthan Collective, the Sylvan Union, the Outer Rim Federation, they are all fighting the same enemy. We will give them every advantage we can. The nobles were on their feet now, shouting protests. This was treason against 10,000 years of tradition. Third, I am personally taking command of the refugee evacuation fleet. When our outer worlds fall, I will be there to help our people escape. No more hiding behind crystal walls while my subjects die. The hall erupted into chaos. Lords and ladies screamed at each other, some demanding that Seraphina be removed from the throne, others rallying to her support. Counselor Vethan stood at her side, his expression unreadable. They will kill you for this, he said quietly. The traditional houses will never accept such radical changes. Then let them try, Seraphina replied. I am done protecting my crown while my people burn. If I must choose between being a living symbol and a dead hero, I choose to be useful. The following weeks were the hardest of Seraphine's life. She worked without sleep, organizing evacuation routes, personally directing refugee ships, and standing on the bridge of her command vessel as world after world fell to the horde. The noble houses that had opposed her gradually fell silent as they watched their young queen throwing herself into the fight. She was there when the colony of Velmthora was evacuated, helping load wounded civilians onto transport ships while Krethis bioforms screamed in the burning sky above. She was there when the orbital station at Kethver was overrun, leading a desperate rearguard action that allowed 3 million refugees to escape. She carried children in her arms, held the hands of the dying, and wept openly for every life she could not save. The galaxy watched in stunned disbelief. This was not the proud queen who had mocked a human ambassador. This was someone else entirely, someone willing to sacrifice everything for her people. Footage spread across the hyperspace network, Seraphina covered in dust and blood, personally helping load evacuation transports. Seraphina standing defiant on the bridge of her ship as Krethis swarms descended on another doomed world. Seraphina holding a dying child, her luminescence flickering with grief, refusing to leave until the last civilian was aboard. On a distant human warship, Admiral Ken Duhan watched these images in silence. His officers had gathered behind him, waiting for his reaction, but he gave none. He simply watched as the young queen who had once laughed at him now gave everything she had for her people. Sir, Captain Yoon Min-ji said carefully. The Valorian Empire will fall within a month at their current rate of losses. If we are going to act, we need to decide soon. Du Hyan did not respond immediately. On the screen, Serafina was shouting orders to her crew, her voice hoarse from exhaustion. Her royal robes replaced by a simple military uniform stained with the evidence of hard fighting. She has changed, he said finally. Sir? When she came to Earth, I was not sure if her regret was genuine. I have seen too many rulers apologize only because they need something. But this, he gestured at the footage. This is not a performance. She is not doing this for us. She is doing this because she finally understands what it means to serve. Captain Yoon leaned forward. Does this mean we are going to help them? Admiral Kan Du-Hyan stood, his decision made. Signal the fleet. We moved to Valorian space in 6 hours. A fierce smile spread across Captain Yoon's face. And what message should I send to the Queen? Du-Hyan considered for a moment. Tell her that humanity always repays its debts, both the good ones and the bad ones. She showed us contempt, and we left. Now she has shown us courage, and we are coming. Tell her to hold the line. Help is on the way. On the far side of the galaxy, surrounded by death and fire and the endless hunger of the Krethis horde, Queen Serafina Velthora received the message. For the first time in months, she allowed herself to hope. But she did not stop fighting. There would be no rest until her people were safe. The 26-year-old royal queen mocked him, so he walked away without ever looking back. Part 5. The sky above Valoria Prime burned with the light of a dying sun. Krethis bioships filled the upper atmosphere like a plague of locusts, their organic hulls pulsing with hungry anticipation. Below them, the last Valorian fleet held formation around the homeworld, 300 ships against 3,000. A desperate stand against impossible odds. Queen Serafina stood on the bridge of her flagship, watching the approaching swarm with exhausted resignation. Her luminescence had faded to a pale flicker, and her once perfect skin was marked with the scars of a dozen battles. She had not slept in 3 days, had barely eaten in a week, and every fiber of her being screamed for rest. But she would not rest. Not while her people still needed her. Your Majesty. Admiral Velthan, her highest-ranking military commander, approached with heavy footsteps. The human fleet has entered our system. They are requesting communication. Seraphine's heart leaped, but she forced herself to remain calm. Put them through. The holographic display flickered, and then Admiral Kang Du-Hyan appeared before her. He wore the same simple gray uniform, the same steady expression, but something had changed in his eyes, a fire that had not been there before. Admiral Kang. Seraphine's voice cracked despite her efforts to control it. You came. I told you to hold the line. You held it. Humans honor those who keep their word. Behind him, Serafina could see the bridge of a massive warship, filled with human officers moving with urgent purpose. Beyond the viewport, hundreds of human vessels dropped out of hyperspace, their weapons already charging for battle. My fleet is at your disposal, Du-Hyan continued. My soldiers are ready to fight. But I need to know, are you willing to trust us? Completely, without reservation? Yes. The word came without hesitation. Tell me what to do, and I will do it. Something that might have been approval flickered across Du-Hyan's face. Then follow my lead, Your Majesty. We are going to show the Krethis what happens when humans and Valorians fight together. The Battle of Valoria Prime would be remembered for 1,000 generations. Human warships tore into the Krethis swarm with devastating precision, their weapons cutting paths of fire through the organic mass. Valorian vessels followed close behind, their ancient technology complementing human ferocity with elegant efficiency. The two fleets moved as one, synchronized through a command structure that Serafina had surrendered willingly to Admiral Kang. And the Krethis died. They died by the thousands, then by the hundreds of thousands, their bioships rupturing under concentrated fire that they could not predict or counter. Human tactics were unlike anything the Horde had faced before, unpredictable, aggressive, and utterly relentless. But the space battle was only half the war. On the surface of Valoria Prime, Krethis ground forces had already landed, their swarm intelligence directing billions of drone organisms toward the population centers. If the cities fell, no naval victory would matter. "I need to be down there," Serafina told Admiral Kang. "My people are dying while I sit safely in orbit." To her surprise, Duhayan nodded. "I was hoping you would say that. I am leading the ground assault personally. Will you fight beside me?" For a moment, Serafina could not speak. This was the man she had mocked as a mayfly, an insect, a child playing at civilization. And now he was offering her the honor of fighting at his side. "It would be my privilege," she said. The drop was brutal. Serafina had never experienced anything like it. The violent shaking of the assault pod, the screaming heat of atmospheric entry, the bone-jarring impact of landing. She stumbled out onto the streets of her own capital city, her ceremonial energy blade in hand, and found herself face to face with the Krethis for the first time. They were nightmares given form, chitinous monsters that towered over her, their multiple limbs ending in razor-sharp claws, their bodies bristling with organic weapons. They moved with terrifying speed, their swarm intelligence coordinating them into a single devastating force. But the humans were faster. Admiral Kang Duhayan moved through the Krethis like a force of nature, his heavy armor turning aside claws that would have torn Serafina apart. His weapons spat fire in controlled bursts, each shot finding a vital point, each kill creating an opening for the soldiers behind him. He did not hesitate, did not falter, did not show even a moment of fear. Serafina found herself fighting at his side, her blade flashing in the smoke-filled air. She was not as strong as the humans, not as durable, not as aggressive, but she was still a warrior of a proud species, and she would not let them fight alone. Together, they pushed through the streets of the burning capital. Human and Valorian soldiers fought side by side, covering each other, protecting each other, dying for each other. The old barriers of pride and prejudice crumbled in the face of shared struggle, and something new was born in their place respect. The turning point came at the central plaza, where the largest concentration of Krethis had gathered. Duhayan called for a coordinated strike, and what followed was devastation beyond anything Serafina had ever witnessed. Human orbital weapons rained fire from the sky, while ground forces pushed from every direction, crushing the swarm between hammer and anvil. When the smoke finally cleared, the Krethis hive mind was broken. The remaining organisms scattered in confusion, easy prey for the hunting parties that would spend the next weeks clearing them from the planet. Valoria Prime was scarred, burned, wounded, but alive. Serafina found Admiral Kang standing alone in the ruined plaza, his armor blackened with Krethis blood, his visor raised to show the calm face beneath. Human soldiers and Valorian warriors gathered at a respectful distance, watching their commanders with exhausted wonder. "You came for us," Serafina said, her voice thick with emotion. "Even after everything I said. Even after I mocked your people and rejected your offer. You came." Duhayan turned to face her, and for the first time, she saw something like warmth in his dark eyes. "Do you know why? Because I proved I could change. Because I showed you that I valued my people more than my pride." "Yes," he agreed. "But that is only part of it. When you came to Earth, you asked me why humans remember our dead. You wondered why we visit memorials and carry the weight of every name we have lost." Serafina nodded, remembering the quiet hillside with its rows of white stones. "We remember because we know how precious life is. Every moment matters because we have so few of them. And when we see someone else who understands that truth, someone who was willing to sacrifice their own comfort for the sake of others. We recognize a kindred spirit. He extended his hand toward her, a human gesture of respect and partnership. "You'd call this mayflies, Your Majesty." "You were right. We are brief. We burn fast and bright. But in that brief burning, we accomplish things that eternal empires cannot. We change. We grow. We become better." Serafina took his hand, her slender fingers closing around his armored palm. "And you saw that potential in us?" "I saw that potential in you." The Valorian Empire has survived for 10,000 years by being unchanging. Perhaps it is time to try something new. Around them, human and Valorian soldiers began to mix, sharing water and rations, tending each other's wounds, speaking in halting phrases as they struggled to bridge the gap between their languages. The ancient walls of separation were crumbling, and neither side seemed eager to rebuild them. Serafina looked down at the ruined city that had been her home since childhood. It would take decades to rebuild, perhaps centuries to fully recover from the devastation of the Krethis invasion. But for the first time since the war began, she could imagine a future where her people not only survived, but thrived. "Admiral Kang," she said formally, "on behalf of the Valorian sovereignty, I offer a formal apology for my conduct when we first met. I was arrogant, dismissive, and cruel. I do not expect forgiveness, but I want you to know that I understand now what I failed to understand then." Du-Hyan released her hand and offered a respectful bow, exactly as deep as the one he had given in her throne room. "Neither more nor less." "Apology accepted, Your Majesty. And for what it is worth, I think you have grown more in these few months than most rulers grow in a lifetime." "That is worth protecting." Serafina returned the bow, matching his depth precisely. When she straightened, she was surprised to find herself smiling. "So what happens now?" she asked. "Do we negotiate trade agreements and mutual defense pacts?" "Eventually," Du-Hyan agreed. "But first, I think we should help each other bury our dead and rebuild our cities. Partnership is built on shared work, not just shared words." "I agree." Serafina looked once more at the soldiers mingling around them, at the proof that two species who had once stood apart could learn to stand together. "And Admiral? Thank you for not giving up on us. Thank you for giving us a second chance." Admiral Kang Du-Hyan, the human ambassador who had walked away without ever looking back, allowed himself a small smile. "Everyone deserves a second chance, Your Majesty. The question is always whether they are willing to earn it." "You were." Together, they walked out of the ruined plaza, toward a future that neither of them could have imagined when they first met. The galaxy was still dangerous. The Krethis horde was weakened but not destroyed. 1,000 challenges waited on the horizon. But for the first time in their history,